activities every week for those who want to learn. And then there are knowledge programs. So for example, the technique of transcendental meditation has been found to be very beneficial for health. So a lot of research has been done showing, in fact, I could say the American Heart Association has said that it's the only meditation it recommends for reducing blood pressure. It's the only one that works, and in many different areas. It reduces disease rates because obviously disease is related to stress. So there are classes on health that are offered at the center. There are classes on business and management. At Maharishi University of Management, as the name implies, it's a school of management, teaching people how to manage themselves and then how to manage other people, to manage a business. But we're also very interested in managing the environment. So we have the most successful sustainable living program in America. We have buildings that are completely energy self-sufficient. We have the largest organic agriculture indoor facility in the state of Iowa. So many of our programs are concerned with agriculture. We have one of the 10 largest computer professional programs in America at Maharishi University of Management. So we're very much into developing technologies that are useful for improving comfort in life, but at the same time, through the technique of transcendental meditation, maintaining a balanced mind and improving the psychology of the person.
Okay, so you are here in Ghana.
Yes.
Let me ask, what is the goal of this foundation and of your activities? What are you expecting?
Well, the goal is very lofty. The goal is to create in the world a state of permanent world peace. Now,
well, indeed, lofty.
Yes, but here's the thing. When Maharishi started teaching transcendental meditation back in 1955, he would say, I've come with a technique to bring peace to the individual and peace to the world. Now, you think back to 1955. I was in school in 1955. We were always having drills, duck and cover, dive under the desk because a nuclear bomb is going to drop. Now, that's a huge level of fear. You don't have that level
of course, that comes shortly after the World War II.
After World War II. And of course, World War II, the first nuclear bombs were detonated, and that changed the face of warfare forever because, up until then, a lot of people would get killed in wars, but you didn't destroy an entire city so easily. So it was a new level of fear in the world. And yet Maharishi was coming out with the message that he had a technology to create peace. And over the years, during the 1960s, he created teachers of transcendental meditation. More people begin to learn. And then in 1972, I should just backtrack a little bit. What Maharishi had always maintained was if you have 1% of the population reducing their stress level through transcendental meditation, you would start to see a reduction of stress in the whole society. Now, in 1972, there were 24 cities in the United States that had 1% of the population practicing transcendental meditation. And some scientists decided, well, we'll test Maharishi's prediction. So they did a very detailed analysis of the FBI crime statistics. They took control cities, and they found, yes, when the cities had 1% practicing transcendental meditation, the crime there went down significantly compared to control cities. And then, as more people learned transcendental meditation and took the advanced programs, it's called the TM City program, it was discovered that when meditation was done in a group, the effect was even more powerful. You only needed the square root of 1% of the population. That's a tiny number. I mean, for Ghana, if you have 27 million people, that means you need, about 530 people, something like that. It's a tiny group. But that is sufficient to radiate harmony and peace throughout the whole society. In the same way that, look, there's no light anywhere near me now, but you can see me because I'm lit up. Why? Because you have a light over there. That light travels through the electromagnetic field and lights me up over here. It's the same thing. Consciousness is a field. So when you have creating coherence here, it just spreads throughout the field. So that discovery led to many experiments which have been published in very reputable scientific journals, showing that a group of people doing transcendental meditation and the advanced techniques and yogic flying and all these different techniques actually reduces stress in the whole society, and that shows up as reduced crime, reduced accidents, reduced infant mortality. All of the positive things increase, all of the negative things decrease. Now, to get back to your question about creating peace in the world, you can imagine now today we're approaching a time, very shortly, when there'll be 8 billion people in the world. So the square, everyone at home can do this in their heads, the square root of 1% of 8 billion, it's 9,000. So a group of 9,000 would have an effect on the whole world. Now, for a few times we've managed to achieve that. And what we see is, and when I say for a few times, it's hard to keep 9,000 people with jobs and family responsibilities all in the same group. But when we've managed to do that, compared to the times when the group hasn't been there, there's been a 72% reduction in worldwide terrorism. So the aim, as you say, what are the goals? The aim is to create groups of either for Ghana 500 odd people, not odd people, but 530 people, and for the world groups of 9,000. And what you're seeing already is, because there are now 6 million people practicing transcendental meditation, and some of them are practicing in groups, you're seeing a trend in the world towards greater peace in the world. Now that'll be a big surprise, as you had just said. What about Boko Haram and this and that? But the reality is, compared to what things used to be, where millions of people were killed in wars, now it's a few people here, a few people there. And what Harvard University professor Steven Pinker has shown is we're now living in the most peaceful era in human existence. If you look at the data, you'll find that there are now no wars in Latin America for the first time. In Africa, look how peaceful it is in Africa now compared to what it used to be.
There's apparent peace, because peace is not necessarily the absence of war.
Correct.
But then don't you think this apparent peace is somewhere else? Because here down in Africa, we have economic challenges that do not allow people to sleep, and they don't have that economic peace.
Yes. You're right, absolutely right.
Increase.
That's why Maharishi said, you see, I have a technique to bring peace to the individual and peace to the world. Now, the people who've learned transcendental meditation individually, they have that inner peace. But fortunately, you don't need every single person in the society to learn transcendental meditation for that peace to spread. But you do need a certain number, right? So in other words, if we're just dealing with transcendental meditation, 1% of Ghana's population is 270,000 people. We don't have 270,000 people doing transcendental meditation in Ghana. But if we can create a group, we can create that effect with 530 people. Now we don't have that either, and that's why people are not feeling great inside. But they will do once we have this group.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this affects not only education, it also affects economy.
Absolutely.
It affects the health.
Absolutely.
And
I mean, for example, in Senegal, we instructed 11,000 prisoners. And the government was able to close prisons, because once the prisoners had learned to meditate, they were less stressed, their brains were functioning more coherently, they didn't come back to prison. So this is the solution to crime. You know, you think about it, it's what's in here that creates the crime. If the person is highly stressed, if they don't have a coherent brain, they can't see the consequences of their actions so well. So we reduce the stress, we increase the coherence of the brain, and they cease to be a criminal. It has huge implications for military science, because, you know, the great tragedy of military science is, even if you win the war, you still lose, because you've had your own people killed. So this is a wonderful example for your program about the light and about Christianity, because if you think, one of the fundamental tenets of Christianity is that you should love your enemy.
That's right.
Now that's hard, right? Very, very few countries have managed to be Christian in that value of loving their enemy. But what you can see here with this technology of consciousness is this. Okay, so you create your coherence creating group, could be in the military. Maybe there's a prevention wing in the military. You take a couple of thousand troops and they volunteer to meditate twice a day. That creates coherence or harmony, if you like. Now, you have an enemy over here, guaranteed to be stressed. You create the harmony, the enemy becomes less stressed, you've destroyed your enemy. Not by killing them, but by killing their enmity. You kill the enmity of the enemy, and then you've defended the nation without a shot being fired. This is the highest ideal of military science, and today many militaries are introducing transcendental meditation. Not necessarily because they fully understand the implications for defending the nation, although they're beginning to, but because many military today have a huge problem with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah, certainly.
Huge. And transcendental meditation, well, the Department of Defense in the United States just finished a $4 million study looking at transcendental meditation and post-traumatic stress, because that's a huge problem in America after Iraq and Afghanistan and Vietnam. They found transcendental meditation is by far the most effective way of reducing post-traumatic stress. So now the militaries in many countries are introducing transcendental meditation to increase resilience to those who haven't yet been exposed to war, to reduce the stress level in those who have been exposed, but at the same time, they're reducing the stress in the world. And that's what you're seeing. So I want to emphasize here that you're never safe until you have your coherence creating group. It's no good thinking, oh, everything's great now. It's not magic. It's a science.
What do you think will happen if our parliaments and if our parliament houses had such a program going on for them?
Well, we just saw, didn't we?
That's all right.
Yeah, we just saw the president giving a very great speech about how things are getting better, and a lot of people are shouting, oh, you know, all these things. The thing is, to understand how government works, it's actually very simple. The government is a reflection of the collective consciousness of the nation. So if the consciousness of the nation is divided, then the government will be divided. And when you watch the president on television, you see people shouting at him. There's division there. But that's not the fault of the president. The president is just reflecting the consciousness of the people. The people are divided, obviously. There's stress. When you reduce the stress in the nation, then the government becomes more coherent, and it becomes possible to govern. And then you can have unrestricted progress when you've got the nation coherent. So now in those countries, for example in Mozambique, where President Chissano introduced transcendental meditation into his military, and he's very outspoken that was the cause of the end of the civil war. And he's now actually building a consciousness-based school near Maputo as a demonstration project for Mozambique. And then President Santos of Colombia last year won the Nobel Peace Prize for ending the war with the FARC. But he gives the credit to transcendental meditation. This is well known by heads of state who've introduced this program, that this is effective, and this is the art of good government. Keep the coherence in the country high, and then everything else starts to work better.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. You, Doc, you're also the executive vice president of the Global Union of Scientists for Peace.
Yes.
Tell us about this Global Union of Scientists for Peace. What do you do? Who are they?
Well, over the last 50 years, there have been more than 650 scientific studies showing that transcendental meditation brings peace to the individual, it brings peace to a city, it brings peace to the world. So a group of scientists, including Nobel laureates, for example, Dr. Pachauri, and the president of Colombia, President Santos, and the former prime minister of Japan, for example, and leading scientists at different universities around the world, we decided to form a union of scientists to be able to inform the world that this is a scientific fact. And so we've held conferences. We just held a big conference in Kiev with General Vasily Krutov, who was the head of the defense forces there in Ukraine. And he's an outspoken proponent. And in fact, the other day, David Lynch, who's a famous Hollywood film director, met with the president of Ukraine. And the president of Ukraine said, I think the work you're doing is very valuable. So presidents are recognizing the work of the Global Union of Scientists for Peace. And what we do is we organize conferences and we invite scientists and heads of state to come and inform them of the research, because most of them are not aware that there are hundreds of published studies done at independent universities showing the benefits of transcendental meditation.
Well, let's look at this. What has been your, do I even call it success rate so far? What have you achieved in your visits here?
Oh, here. Well, we had a wonderful meeting at the British Consul. I think it's called the British
Council.
British Council. No, not the Consul. That's right. The British Council. We had a meeting there where I explained, the whole program to the educators who had come, and that was very successful. We have a couple of schools now very interested. And then I had a meeting with some of the people who've learned transcendental meditation, and they had a lot of questions about, the meditation program, the programs for health, the programs for creating better housing. One of our programs is to build housing, which actually is fortune-creating housing. Most people don't realize that the housing you're living in could actually be damaging to your health. Now, in New York, there was a big scandal about what's called sick building syndrome. They build these buildings and then people in them complain of sickness.
And with asbestos?
Well, it could be asbestos, it could be Legionnaire's disease, it's poor lighting, it's poor air circulation, it's poor orientation. But this ancient knowledge, it's called Vastu, ancient knowledge of Vastu, is the knowledge of how to build houses that create good fortune. Now, this will be amazing to the listeners. Well, how could housing affect your fortune? But in fact, much of the stress in society is caused by inadequate housing. Now, I can give you an example.
Right.
Have you ever had to eat a big meal at midnight?
don't really have that experience.
You don't want to do that, do you? But the reality is, according to the laws of Ghana, you're perfectly at liberty to eat a big meal at midnight.
Yeah, sure.
You choose not to.
Yes.
Why? Because you don't feel good. Now, how does your stomach know where the sun is? The point is, your physiology is linked to nature. Your physiology is influenced by the sun. It's a very, very powerful influence on your physiology. So, according to these building principles, you would always have the dining room on the south side of the house, where the influence of sun on your digestion is maximum when you're eating your midday meal. You would have the rooms where you relax on the west side, because the